Welcome to the Innovative Hotelier, brought to you by Hotels Magazine. I'm your host, Robin Trimingham. It's no secret that hoteliers around the world continue to struggle to attract and hire employees at all levels of their operation, including the HR department itself. So my question today is, what do you do when you don't have a fully staffed HR team, or you're the GM of a boutique property and you're trying to perform this function without additional support? My guest today, Sid Upadhyay, a co-founder and CEO of Wizehire, is here today to offer insights regarding HR hospitality trends and ideas for attracting, screening, and hiring qualified candidates at all levels of the hospitality sector. Join me now for my conversation with Sid. FOH is a global food service and hospitality company that manufactures smart commercial-grade solutions. Headquartered in Miami, the company designs and manufactures all their restaurant and hotel products. They have showrooms and distribution centers located throughout the globe, and their products are always in stock and ready to ship from any of their distribution centers worldwide. Welcome, Sid. Thanks very much for finding time to chat with me today. I know you've been traveling a lot.
Thanks for the opportunity. Always fun to get together and talk about the industry. There's so much change going on around us.
I think a lot of our global listeners may not yet be familiar with Wizehire. So perhaps you could take a minute or two, tell us a little bit about what you do and what inspired you to start this company.
Thank you for the opportunity again. Wizehire is here to take care of the busy work so you can find top talent. We are an online hiring and onboarding platform. We're almost a decade old, and we've been on this journey to support everyone from a Main Street business to a growing and expanding business. Our job is to help you ideate the roles that you need. Think about, what does top talent look like? Ask you only the questions that you know the answers to. How much is compensation going to be? What's the location? What does success look like? And based on that, our software and our team of hiring coaches will help you craft a unique job ad that speaks to the best talent out there. We'll post that ad on all the top job sites. And then as candidates apply, we'll help you with the real hard work. We'll pre-screen candidates. We'll give you guidance on how to interview them so you can deliver that world-class interviewing experience akin to the Fortune 500s that you compete with. Our job is to help you get the talent you needed yesterday as soon as possible, and then help you onboard them and set them up for success so you can retain them day in and day out. I think we're just getting started. There's so much for us to do, but we love the industry, and my roots come from it. The background of how we got started was actually personality assessments. It's actually a great story. I was not a true believer yet. I was working with my co-founder, and we were using personality assessments with consultants like Bain and McKinsey, going to large organizations and bringing about change. And we saw a pattern again and again, which was the consultant would help people find roles that were a better fit for their true self, roles that help them, work with their work styles. And as we step back and recognize, so many of the best jobs on Main Street, helping guests, would never have access to that $1,000 an hour consultant. And so we went on this journey building, a platform first to screen candidates. We recognized that managers didn't have enough candidates. And so we went about and just asking why and following our customers' needs has brought us here today, where it's all about delivering that experience that you would get at, an Apple or a Southwest to that, Best Western down the street. And I think every person needs and deserves that. So it's a worthy mission, and we're excited about it.
I worked for a major brand that actually was kind of at the forefront of using what I'm going to call personality screening or interviewing in an electronic capacity in the hiring process. So how would you say your platform differs from what a brand might already have in place?
If you think about that playbook that you'll get from, let's say, a big brand or a franchisor, it's going to give you the first steps. Our goal is to make that person that take that context of the personality assessment, a skill assessment, the full backstory about an individual, and ensure that that busy general manager can deliver a consistent experience. In today's market, we have to get to candidates as soon as possible. We have to like compete with so many more businesses. And the way we do that is by delivering a incredible hiring experience, one that's effective, empathetic to who they are, one that is thoughtful about all the nuances of hiring that all the other companies have time to think about and read the books about. Our job is to pair that together into like a little like, primer, so that if it's your first time hiring, or if you've done this dozens of times and had challenges, it's going to solve the problems. And I'll give you a specific example. We will give you an interview guide that'll step you through the real questions to ask. So versus focusing on surface level discussion, hey, I see you like the Mets. I like the Mets as well. No, let's get to the heart of it, right? Tell me about a challenge that you've had with a guest in this experience, and let's like learn from those stories. And I think if what we're really doing is delivering a consistent hiring experience, so you truly find great talent versus bringing your own bias to the process, but can do it as fast as you possibly can. So it's all about, working to the scorecard so you can find out, is this person the person you want to bet on to deliver that, 5-star guest experience?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you're right. We're all human beings, and our own bias, our own point of view, that definitely affects our human interactions, particularly when we're doing something like hiring. How would you say that hiring trends now and the use of technology are different from how they were before the pandemic?
Oh, I think everything has changed since the pandemic. I think the industry is radically different, and I think it's changed for the better in many cases for the worker. And I think it's going to allow us to build better, stronger relationships that ultimately, reduce the labor costs. We're not hiring as regularly. We're building and developing talent. But if you step back a little bit, we still have a large gap in the industry versus where we were. The demand is ever growing. This was probably one of the busiest summers. I remember being at TSA PreCheck the other day, and it was like the most peak passengers. With that in mind, and you think about the constraints that we're facing and the stress that it puts on teams on the ground, we have to get the top talent in ASAP, because otherwise that housekeeper that we've been depending on is going to walk because they're overstretched. And so with technology, what we can do today is expedite the process, but do it so in a thoughtful way. So we're really getting people that are going to stay with the business in the long run. And it really starts by, that first job ad that we put out. Is it speaking to the talent that is going to be here for the long run? Or is it speaking to someone that is, just looking to, think about this role or the next role? When you think about what happened at the height of the pandemic, we had the introduction of remote jobs enter all of our marketplaces. So we had all this new competition. We were already competing with, Amazon and Walmart in many cases, and wages had to rise. And that's something that I think the industry has already arrived at. But the second challenge here is all those organizations have world-class Fortune 500 recruiters. They have a machine that, even if we have our big brand and we've got our resources, how do we keep up with it? How do we ensure people show up for the interview when they can in 15 minutes get a role? And that's where technology and the partnership, where it can't become fully automated. It needs to be deeply personal, just like our client experience, allows us to, show that candidate what it's like to work at our business, show our culture, and do it in a way that's, thoughtful. So I'll give you a really clear example of this. Today, I think the best in class, hotels will attract the right talent and respond to them immediately, because that response time is critical. They'll get them on the call. They'll schedule that interview. They'll bring them in. And when they bring them in, that's a chance both to learn who they are, but also to start selling. There's a lot more that we can do as we get to that offer stage and how we retain them. But just in the attraction and the screening stages, it's the pace is just faster. And I don't think that ever goes back to how things were. Candidates are demanding so much more of our industry. And I think it's, through the use of tech, we will rise to the occasion and ultimately show people that this is a great industry to get into, because, we all are always striving to do the best for the guest. And I think it just aligns everyone really well.
It's very interesting listening to you talk about how things are now, because I certainly can remember a day when it was the antithesis of what you're describing, where applicants would be forced to fill out online applications and your application would go into the abyss.
Exactly.
And unless you were the chosen one or the chosen three for the interview, there was no feedback. There was no, what did you do well? What did you not do well? Am I even in, the application
There's a
process?
black box. There's a
None
black hole.
of that. And applying for work was the most horrible, absolutely horrible experience. It would, demoralizing. It would shake your confidence. It was agonizing. It was stressful. So it's very encouraging to hear that, it's now come around. So we're thinking much more about, the applicant themselves, so that the person that we want to hire.
It's the start of a relationship. And I think it is the big brands and the Fortune size organizations that are, raising the bar and putting the onus on us, whether we're a, boutique firm or just getting started. We have to rise to that occasion. It's only with technology and expert advice can we fast track that journey. Otherwise, we're just, we're playing a losing game. It's a game of chance on Main Street versus skill at that enterprise. And I think that's what we just have to help and do our part to level the playing field.
You were talking before about this being the busiest summer ever. And I have to say, I agree with you. I talk to people in North America, in the UK, in Germany. I have a conversation coming up with a client in Tibet, if you can believe that.
Love it.
I'm really excited about it, actually. And everybody is saying the same thing, that, tourism, travel, hotel bookings, however you're participating in the industry, everything is on the up. Do you see this situation continuing into 2024?
So, if we were to take a look at the bookings nights chart over a long term, it's always been going up and to the right in some sense. We've had the blips and the ups and downs, but I think our industry is growing faster than the rest of the market, the rest of the economy. And that's a great thing because, as, all markets develop and I'm thinking globally here, we are social creatures. We want to connect. We want to travel. We want to see things. We want to be with our friends and family. And, we in the industry have this high opportunity to serve and delight and give that great experience. And so we at Wizehire are so bullish on the industry. I personally come from the industry and, I think, it'll be fun, for you and I to get together over the couple of years and just see how this thing just keeps clipping forward. I mean, obviously we've seen a big run up and realization of the trend lines as they were prior to the pandemic in, 2 years time. But I think it'll ease slowly and get back to just that consistent, increase in demand. That's our sense, but we'll maybe leave it to the macro forecasters to give us better guidance on that.
Fair enough. With all of this going on, though, why would you say it's more important than ever to make sure that your job postings are listed on the right job board?
This is, I think, the first question we get when we start working with someone. The way we hire has changed because, again, the landscape around us has changed. There's so many new players. There's remote jobs that someone can go for. And so we have to work very hard to find that right board, the right site for that right candidate. And it varies by roles. If you're looking for your back office, your operations, that's a different candidate and a different candidate pool than someone that's going to be your guest services person. And that's why, our job is to primarily take care of that busy work. So your general manager is not, logging into 15 sites, downloading candidates, running everything on a spreadsheet, and, then dropping the ball because they got to go deal with something else. We are in this industry, given the high standards that we place for ourselves, wearing so many hats. And that's, I think, where one of the challenges comes up, which is, if we are to compete with the Amazons in hiring, we have to do 15 other things that we didn't have to do previously. And again, back to your question about technology and getting to the right place, that is the only way we can keep up at the end of the day, I think.
So let's play what if. Supposing you post a job for a night auditor. Traditionally, that's the really hard job to fill. I mean, it's all numbers at 3 a.m, and a lot of us are just not wired for that. But you get 40 applicants.
That's a great result, by the way.
What do you do? What's your advice for narrowing the applicant pool down to a manageable number of interviews?
So let's first think about like the whole process that we want to build. And we want to run this process consistently. We want to set it up from the beginning. Too often, I think we're making up our process as we go, and that's where we lose great talent. So first off, we want to think about like, what are the outcomes here, right? We want, it's a very detail-oriented work. The hours are tough. It's also very routine and repetitive work. And so from one perspective, that's where our personality assessments and our DISC Plus assessment can come in very handy, because you can really focus in on the work style that works best for someone. Now, of course, we're not going to rely purely on an assessment. We want to, when we get someone in, dig into the questions. If they have experience in the industry, that's going to be helpful. But, in this market, we have to draw more people into the industry. This is an opportunity to expand our pool, expand the long-term audience that we can build a career with. And those individuals is where you have to really focus in on the questions. Do their past experiences have any transferable skills? Is their work style conducive to like the work that's about to happen? Like, have they worked these hours? Tell me about, and this is where like our job as when we work with clients is to provide deep, insightful interview guides that'll focus on the individual. Hey, John, I understand that, you like a range and diversity of work. Can you tell me a little bit about like a past experience where you've had to deal with a lot of monotonous work? How did you like cope with that, as an example? And, that's getting deep to ground truth, which ultimately I think helps us understand, is this person the right person for the role? I think before you get them in for the interview, I think there is a step I skipped, which is, of course, getting them to the interview. You've gotten resumes, you've done some filtering, you're looking at, are they able to, commute to the area? Do they have a skill base or experience that's applicable here? Maybe you did a skill assessment. Speed to candidate is highly, highly critical in this market. So it's the moment they apply, getting that email out to them, leaning on text messages, doing that phone call, because if you're not following through at that pace, another employer is from another industry. And that's, I think, one of the big challenges that we face with no-shows, especially in as far as interviewing goes, but even first day no-shows. As you get further into the process, you brought them in, they're meeting the team. Having a team involved in the process is critical, because it's not just a relationship they're going to build with you as the GM, but, that guest services person as they come into work. That's a relationship they're going to have. It makes it easier to sell the role and ultimately get them to, say yes and not have them decline the offer because they've built more bonds. So a little bit of advice there. Think about the skill base, think about transferable skills, be fast in responding to people, much as we aim for our guests themselves. Definitely focus on the culture fit, the work style, because every role is so unique. And then when you do get time, at that stage of making the offer, deliver it verbally, get them that written document as soon as possible. You'll hear me say the same thing again. Speed and consistency is how we win talent in this marketplace.
That's very interesting. You're making me think of a secondary question I'd love to ask you. Do you have an opinion? Is it as effective to do Zoom interviews as it is to do face-to-face?
I think in our industry, face-to-face is the superior option, but we have to think about the candidate and their process. What I found as working really well is to do that initial phone screen and then bring people in for that interview. We are, of course, in an industry that works with guests face-to-face. Yeah. We work in teams. You and I are having a call on Zoom, and that's great that we have that flexibility and ability. But I think the usage of Zoom is excellent at the top of the funnel when we're really trying to show our eagerness and willingness to meet that candidate where they're at, whether phone or Zoom is excellent. But ultimately, I mean, this is a role where, the interpersonal skills and their ability to connect is going to be critical. And, it does make it easier for them to also get a sense of what it is like to be in the business and walk around and understand this is what my day-to-day could be like. So a nuanced answer, but I think it depends on the role at the end of the day.
Established in 2002, FOH is a woman-owned global food service and hospitality company that manufactures smart, savvy, commercial-grade products, including plateware, drinkware, flatware, hotel amenities, and more. Driven by innovation, FOH is dedicated to delivering that wow experience that restaurants and hotels crave, all while maintaining a competitive price. All products are fully customizable, and many are also created using sustainable, eco-friendly materials such as straws and plates made from biodegradable paper and wood and PBA-free drinkware. FOH has two established brands, Front of the House, focused on tabletop and buffet solutions, and Room 360, which offers hotel products. Check out their collections today at fohworldwide.com. Let's talk about senior roles, because we've talked a lot about the night auditor and the front desk and guest services, but let's face it, when you need to hire a key person, I think it's the same game, but the stakes are much higher. So I think you really have to elevate your game at the same time. Personal story. One of the jobs that I successfully got was by convincing an employer in the province of Alberta that I, living in Ontario, was the ideal candidate. And I had to fly out there, for the big interview, which turned out to be something like 3 interviews, one after the next. And finally, they give me a hotel room key and tell me I can have 10 minutes to go change for dinner. And I knew when I opened the door of the hotel room that I would know immediately if I was getting the job. Hotel suite, chances looking really good. Tiny itty bitty room near the kitchen, not so much. So I walked through the door of the most beautiful room you ever saw in your life, and I went, I am so going to get this. But so what's my point? My point is that I think that how you handle the face-to-face experience with a senior person, with a key person that you really need to join the team, I think that's everything.
I think it speaks to the fact that the process is us learning about the candidate, but the candidate learning about us, and that two-way dialogue. It's often, I think that's where we have to start reframing the process at the top of it, which is, hey, I would love to have a career story conversation. Take me through your journey. I want to feel like I'm watching the novel, on screen. But at the end of every conversation, opening it up for them to have a dialogue with you about what are they looking for, give them a chance for those questions. And if you start to build that rapport early, then I think as you get further in the process, you've learned so much more about them and you can tailor that experience. Sometimes, and I think speaking just broadly about senior hiring, you may adapt your process here much more than you will for your frontline hires, because you want to be flexible to really sell to that candidate as you start to winnow the funnel. There may be people that they want to meet with that are outside of your normal routine. Let's say you've got a food and beverage program and no one has asked about this as an example. Well, hey, if this person has a background in food and beverage, give them an opportunity to have that experience. Sit down with the director there, have a meal, go have a conversation. Again, we're in a deeply relational industry, and it's not about just the one-to-one interview of you as the CEO, operator, president, and this individual. It's about the full team sport, because you and that incoming GM may have a great rapport, but if they don't throughout the interview build relationships with others, your director of sales as an example, how are they set up for success? And I think this is where at some point in the journey of interviewing that senior leader, you've winnowed down, you've learned a lot, you're going to keep digging for ground truth, but you're also starting to set them up for success potentially. So I love that the focus that we have to have here, which is it's a multiplayer team at the end of the day. We have to have everyone in the team, and as we get them in person, we should be able to tailor that experience to win them at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, you're so right. Working in the hotel industry is, I think, that maybe one of the biggest examples of teamwork, because you interact with people at all different levels above and below you from a huge number of departments, and they may be doing something critical for you and you don't really even know very much about what they do other than that's the guy.
And there again, that team effort in the interview is critical, because you may get a perspective that's so focused on that ROI that you're looking for, but the alignment that they have at the peer level is going to speak to their success in the job. So you said it perfectly.
Let's change the subject a little bit. Hotels, for the most part, the whole hospitality industry is very seasonal. It's the blessing and the curse of the entire industry. So, having the right number of people on staff given this seasonal ebb and flow, that's a constant struggle, particularly if you're a brand that's been used to using profitability modeling to determine how many people you should have in the various departments. What are your recommendations for handling this endless revolving door of hiring, and if you're fortunate enough to have enough staff in the first place, laying people off, and then 3 months later you have to start the whole process all over again?
So this is one of our biggest challenges, and I think there are some strategies to get ahead of it, and I think it requires us to think about our portfolio of properties. There's some strategies that I think, like, especially those that are starting to think about de-risking their own business and are, focusing on a property portfolio that may be very much summer oriented, and then one that's very winter oriented. I think when you step back and you think about us as operators, starting to de-risk our business this way, and then you think about these properties, there's a really interesting opportunity here, which is to actually build a talent network across your brands. I was just the other day chatting with actually one of our customers, Scott at Luck Hotels, and they have a portfolio that's summer oriented. There are a lot in the New England area in America, and they have a lot of properties that are very summer oriented, but then a large number that see their seasonal peaks in the winters. And what we've done with them is build a talent network such that those individuals that may have been up-leveled, brought into the business, understand their style of hospitality, can transition between properties as they start to think about it. And that's obviously only accessible to those of us that have larger properties and larger units. One thing to consider thinking about is setting, of course, let's say like you've only got a few properties, you're not able to take advantage of seasonality and, rotate people between, then you have to have like upfront conversations to set people up for success. It should never be jarring to someone that, hey, I just entered this industry and wow, 3 months in, like that was so much fun. I had a great summer, but like, what's happening? You got to ensure that anyone coming into the industry, because we want to think about the long term of the industry, understands this nuance. And if you start thinking a little bit about the opportunity when you're upfront with them around a multi-year career, that is a powerful thing. Like the moment when you're having that conversation, okay, it's low season and we're going to have a reduction. Yes, that's tough news, but I think if you've teed it up enough and you've talked about a lot of other opportunities, and if you're thinking about your business as one where we don't want to keep spending our time focusing on acquiring talent, but instead retaining it, and you start thinking about, hey, next summer, here's where I want you to be, and you start planting that seed, you talk about the other roles, you start building and developing relationships, you can get ahead of it in the future by having that, focus on the long-term career plan. We're seeing so many of the big brands deliver this context to especially their franchisees that have had challenges with this in the past. I was just chatting with someone at Hyatt the other day where they've built a plan. We got to keep working on it, but of course it's a rubric so that you can, show someone that there is real long-term potential here, and the seasonality will become less so as you continue to rise in the ranks. And we really want to be inclusive and bring you into the industry. And we're going to keep in touch with you. Like, hey, it's October, it's our low season. I'm going to call and check in with you because like you're the person that's going to be my first call when we start to open up in the spring or whatever the case. Like we have to just take a longer view here. I think that's maybe the best advice. And of course, for those of us that are fortunate to have a portfolio that allows us to, rotate people, definitely that should be like our first tactic.
Yeah, and I think probably a lot of employers are a lot more open to that than they might have been in the past. I talked to a lot of people about AI and data-driven analytics, big data, the whole thing. In the HR industry, in hospitality, how are HR professionals now able to leverage big data to make more informed decisions?
Yeah. So one thing, if we think about, again, the challenge that's like all around us, there's not enough experienced talent in the industry, and we have to bring talent in. One of the biggest places that we're seeing technology and AI come into play is to really help that general manager, that busy hiring manager, understand transferable skills. How is a role that they've not seen before, a patient care coordinator at a multi-unit hospital network. How is that
Yeah,
person
good example.
applicable
Yeah.
for our industry? No, I was coaching someone about this just the other day, and it was like an aha moment when we showed a report that said, actually, there's a lot of transferable skills here. And as a
Yeah, they've
result,
got a lot of rooms. They have to be cleaned. There are people checking in. Yeah, I like this.
and so that's one example. We've obviously, with the advent of like all of us have been using OpenAI's ChatGPT. We've seen a great just usage of that in the hiring process with that hiring manager that was stuck on writing a job ad. Like they needed talent 3 weeks ago, but they've not had a moment to sit down and write a 10-minute ad. Like there's been a great use of technology there. We're very bullish on what's about to come about here. But the one thing that we recognize is that it can be unnerving. There's obviously the concerns of bias, and I think that's where there's a lot of great work happening to reduce bias in AI. One thing we've been helping to spearhead, but the most applicable use cases are going to be to take care of that busy work. Because at the end of the day, screening and assessing talent has to be done face-to-face, has to be done person-to-person, because it is the most critical decision you're going to make. So I would, emphasize that anyone listening to this, think about this technology and how it helps you to augment you, take over that busy work. Back to that idea, like, hey, there's a candidate I may not have even seen because I looked at it and said, oh, that's not even in industry. Let's revisit that. But as we get further in the process, we're not going towards a world where the AI is going to say hire, fire. That's not the case. It's a very nuanced decision, and you got to just lean on more inputs to get to the answer.
Yeah, there's the old expression, knowledge is power. So what strategies are you seeing being implemented to address the skills gap? You've alluded to that. You've alluded to, being more open-minded about what skills might be transferable. But when you are taking people on who've worked in the hospital industry, okay, they know hospital, they understand, the basic process, but they've never worked in a hotel. They've never been a concierge. How do you handle that?
Yeah. So this is, I think, where great credit to all the brands in the industry. We're seeing so much work happening in onboarding and training and learning and development. I think I was talking to someone at Marriott the other day where, they for many years now had a program that they can deploy very easily. It's all about, and if you think about this, we're bringing in talent. That talent is excited and eager about our industry. There's a skill gap. We're going to get courseware. We're going to get content. We're going to get training and development at, not just our location, but a group of locations to up-level people. We're going to connect them in peer groups so that they're learning from one another. But the amazing thing that we have to recognize here is if we do this right and we lean in and we invest in this talent, we are opening them up to our industry and particularly our brand for the long term. Because as we step back and we're so insular in thinking about our industry, but very few other places invest so much or are willing to invest so much in individuals. And if we do it well and we teach them about our industry the way they prefer to learn, whether it's through videos or whether it's through just the face-to-face interaction and feedback on what goes well and doesn't go well, especially on what doesn't go well, that's going to set them up for success because then they can see that journey. Final bit about this is, it's not just about delivering content and delivering context, but it's also talking about what is this going to mean for you in the future? Back to career paths, right? This is all about bringing people in, showing them the journey and having examples in your business to say, hey, Marta started out, actually, I don't know if you know this, you should ask her, but she started out in this role 6-7 years ago. And through the same program that you're going through, social proof, this is where she got to. So, there's a lot of openness, I think, in our industry. You should, reach out to your franchisor if you aren't familiar with the programs. But everyone is building these programs right now to just bring in new talent and up-level them to understand what does hospitality look like at this brand or whatever the case.
Let me ask you a little bit of a tough question, or maybe it isn't. I don't know. We'll find out.
I'm excited.
We talked a little bit about an automated screening process being more fair when it comes to screening applicants. Is there a way, though, to promote diversity and inclusion through all of this? Because that is one of the big ESG buckets.
Yeah. I think one of the best ways to think about this is the hiring process that we've run previously is haphazard. It brings our own bias to it. It lacks consistency. And when we have a process that leads to one person, back to like our other dialogue, having a conversation about how much they love the Mets, and so does the general manager, what are you learning from that? You're actually bringing so much bias, and you're probably preferring that candidate. And so back to like fundamentals, when we think about what success in the role looks like, and we think about an interview process and a screening process that's consistent, where every person gets the same questions. Hey, take me through your career. I want to understand your journey. I want to like ask a couple of questions. I want to be focused on this part of the guest experience, this part of the back office experience. By being consistent, we root out the bias that has prevented us from being truly inclusive. And I think that's like a powerful thing. It's such a simple thing, but it's ultimately just focusing on getting the right person by having a great process that ensures that, one, we're treating everyone that does opt into our process well. Now, that there's a caveat there, which is this is the tough part of the question. That's if they raise their hand and are interested in the role. We have to be more proactive in casting a wider net. And if you think back to our conversation previously about the right job sites, the right way to message to candidates, that is where there's a lot of subtlety. And that's where definitely the Fortune 500 companies have way more advantage. Our job is to make that more accessible. But by us or your general manager posting on all the job sites, you're getting more individuals by having language that is speaking to the best candidate. Because again, so often when we're hiring managers, the last time we applied for a job may have been like 15 years ago, right? The whole world has changed. We have to meet the candidate where they are. And so these are a couple of the tactics, right? It's, definitely the process is one of the best ways to build a great DEI like background, but we have to think and push ourselves even further. We were talking about, key hires and how that's a team sport in the hiring process. Who you involve in that interviewing process is critical. If there's a lack of diversity in the interviewing process, what are you telling the diverse candidate at the end of the day? So tough conversations have to be had here, but I think it all comes down from we're all aspiring for the right things. We got to just think about our process, how we attract, how we screen, how we interview, and ultimately retain individuals. And it's great to see so much positive change happen so quickly.
I think you're making a very interesting point, because what you're essentially saying is when we level the playing field, we're actually doing is dissolving what I'm going to call the glass ceiling.
Ideally. And I think these are aspirational goals, and it all comes down to us taking a step back, especially if we run larger operations, on taking stock. Hey, how did we do last quarter? If you have a VP of HR, ask the questions like, I'm hearing that we're implementing a scorecard-based interviewing process. I'm hearing that we're making it consistent, but how did we do? Did we actually change the shape of the business? Are we bringing in new perspectives? Because that's ultimately how we, tailor the experience for such a diverse set of guests at the end of the day.
Let's ask this sort of same thing from a completely different angle. We now have a workforce where the Gen Z people are taking up employment, but older people are working longer and longer. So you can have, to use family terms, you could have the grandchild and the grandparent of different families, but the mindset on the same team. How are HR departments adapting to the evolving expectations of this really diverse, multi-generational workforce?
I love this question. So often when we have conversations about generational shifts, it leads to this very, black and white kind of perspective on individuals. And I love having conversations with hiring managers where it's all about, 9 out of 10 things everyone's going to agree on. Candidates in this world have so many more options. Inflation had been on people's minds. Compensation was on people's minds. People are looking for roots that they can lay down in organizations and build careers. And I think a lot of those are the same things that actually previous generations have wanted and needed. And maybe we're hearing it much more from recent generations, but I'm seeing, at least with our customers, a great excitement to meet these needs of talent, because people are recognizing, hey, I don't want to go through 2021 ever again. I don't want to have that summer where everything opened up and I had half of my properties closed because we just couldn't find the talent. And so we have a much more progressive view on retaining talent today. And I think listening to the team really enables us to retain everyone. I'll give you a couple of examples. We're seeing next day pay become a bigger and bigger topic, especially amongst entry level roles. And that's solving a bigger challenge that's happened in our society, which is like, hey, like so many people have lived historically paycheck to paycheck. Now, there's only so much that we as employers can control. But today, with the advent of technology and like our payroll systems, we're able to, in many cases, give them second day pay. That is leading to greater retention. That is attracting more talent as well. Everything we discussed about, showing what a career path looks like. That's another great example where all the best practices that we want to do to retain, our existing team is just going to open us up to bringing in so many more people. And it's going to, help that person that's just, fresh out of like high school or college, all the way to the person that's been in our business for probably 20, 30 years. Because that all at the end of the day have wanted a place that they can say is a great place to work, where they're finding meaningful work. And, if we can deliver that, bottle it up, and, continue to listen to the team, I think we're set up for success. And I think our industry is being so reflective right now.
We've got 1 or 2 minutes left here. So I'm going to ask you the question I ask a lot of people. What do you feel is the greatest mistake that hoteliers are making at the current time?
This is a tough one. I think one of our biggest opportunities is to accelerate the change and embrace it. We have gone through so much change, and in some cases we have begrudgingly just had to adapt. I think if we've learned one thing from the peak and the trough following the pandemic, it's that change is only accelerating. And I think the best hoteliers today are looking out to like other industries. They're talking to people on Main Street, the other businesses down the street, to understand what is going on so we can accelerate change. Because where we were with minimum wage as an example, or the wage average in our industry, we were at the back of the curve in terms of, meeting candidates' needs, and as a result of bringing in talent that can deliver that 5-star guest experience. I think we have to recognize that we don't want to fall behind or stay static. And I think it's really all about that adaptability. So that's maybe, I'm always an ever optimist. So that's my point of view, which is we've changed a lot, but we can't stop, and we got to embrace it and get ahead of the competition, because the competition is not the other hotel down the street. It is every other business in between the two of you. And I think that's the right mindset that we need to have a big flip in right now.
I think that is a very insightful point and a great place to leave it. Sid, I want to thank you so much for your time today. You've been watching The Innovative Hotelier. Join us again soon for more up-to-the-minute information and advice specifically for the hotel and hospitality industry.
Thanks again for the opportunity. It was an excellent conversation.